Really trying to figure out how to line up the wheel in the wheel well of the truck. Now I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to do the cab mounts on this one. This truck is absolutely massive. Welcome back to another episode of Rusto Mod. We are back on the Sasquatch project, our 1959 Ford F250 that in the last episode, we actually chassis swapped onto a 1994 Ford 7.3 turbo diesel frame. So in the last episode, we cut up a bunch of stuff. We actually ended up cutting almost the entire firewall out of the truck, and we have to figure out how to make this cab fit on its new modernized chassis. So we are going to dig in, we're gonna figure out how we're gonna actually mount the cab to the chassis, get it finalized, and then we can move forward with trying to figure out how we can get this thing to work underneath this new chassis. So let's dig in and show you guys what we have to do. We got our Sasquatch project in the shop, and we gotta figure out how we're going to make the chassis really fit around this old cab. And the first thing that we're gonna have to do is we're gonna line everything up. So if you guys watched the last episode, we were really trying to figure out how to line up the wheel in the wheel well of the truck. Now the wheel well is an odd shape, it's kind of sloped back, so getting it perfectly lined up is a little bit of a challenge. But what we did was we put some blue tape on there, and basically when we lowered the cab down, we tried to line the blue tape up with the center of the wheel. So now we have a rough idea of how we're going to line up the cab in the wheel well. So now the next step is to get it exactly where we want it. So I'm going to go through, I have a plumb bob, and I'm going to put that line straight down exactly where I want it, measure the wheel well perfectly, so that way I know it is exactly where I want it in the frame. Then I can adjust the cab accordingly to where it needs to be. So that's the first step we need to do, because right now the cab is just sitting on some blocks of wood. Once we get exactly where we want it, we can go ahead and try to figure out how we're gonna make some cab mounts. All right, so what I'm gonna try to do is line up the center of the wheel well. I want to try to get the center of this radius and the center of this radius. I gotta kind of have to eyeball it because none of them are the same, so it's a little bit of guessing, but you can kind of see it looks to me like if I center that up and that up, it's about 20 and a half. So if I cut that in half, that should be right at the center line of the wheel, just kind of eyeballing it, which is basically where our blue tape mark is here. So this side looks like it's a lot closer than the other side. So I want to try to match the other side with this one because I think this one looks pretty good. And then we can try to measure the cab to see if it needs to move side to side or forward or back. Right now, I think the cab is actually twisted to the driver's side a little bit. All right, so what I did was I measured the center of the arch of the wheel well on the other side. I could kind of step back and look at it a little bit better on that side. So just to make sure that they're even, I went ahead and I measured from the front of the cab to the center of the wheel on that side. Then I measured the same thing on this side. Then to verify that they're the same, I measured the same distance, and it's 30 inches from the tip of the headlight bucket here to my roughly center line of my wheel. So now I have a reference point of where I need to really line the wheel up in the wheel well and just try to get it eyeballed a little bit closer. It looks like it's actually pretty close, a little bit closer than I originally thought it was going to be. So I wanna just be careful. I don't wanna move it too much. Like I said, it's just on a block of wood, but I'm gonna shimmy it a little bit, get it dialed in, and then I can figure out how it's going to be side to side. So according to my mark on this side, I put the plumb bob down in the center of the wheel well and lined it up with my blue tape mark, and then also I lined it up with the center of the wheel there, and you can kind of see it looks pretty good. I think that's kind of right where I want to be. Now mind you, we are switching to a 37-inch tire that we have outside. this is just a mock-up, so I'm gonna have to fit a much larger tire in that wheel well than what's actually on there right now. So I wanna have plenty of room to turn. Okay, so you can see on this side, it's not quite lined up with the center of the wheel well at that 30-inch mark from the front of the cab. So I'm going to have to shift the cab forward. Looks like less than a ½ inch just to get that to line up a little bit better. I think I'm just gonna try to push it, see if it'll move any. All right, so I shimmied the cab around quite a bit to be able to get it lined up, and I think I got it pretty close. So what I did on the back was I actually measured the center line of the cab and then the center line of the frame, measured from each side to side, and try to get it as close as I can in the center. It's very hard to measure this thing because the cab is all bent. The frame is just not perfectly true, but I measured to some rivets that were in the frame and then some holes that were in the frame, trying to line it up as best as I can, but there's just no really good flat spot on this cab to be able to measure from. So I went with the only thing that was really straight on the cab, which is these little indents in the back of the cab there. I went off the center line of that to get where it is positionally on the back of the frame, got that lined up, did the same thing on the front. A lot of measuring back and forth. I got it pretty close on the frame, at least close enough where we can measure for our cab mounts. So now I'm gonna show you guys how I'm gonna do the cab mounts on this one. I was trying to think of a few different ways to do it, but this is the easiest, quickest way I can make these cab mounts work. So let me show you guys what I'm gonna do. Quick look at the cab mounts. So these are the original front cab mounts that were on the truck. And then up top here, you can kind of see this little hole here, and that's where the cab originally mounted to the original frame. So we're not too far off of where the original cab mounts were supposed to mount. We're just pretty far off with the height of it. So what I'm going to do is, I think on the front, these are just riveted on here. And what I think would be the easiest thing to do is just grind those rivets off and then just make basically a plate to come up and grab that little hole up there. Once I get the plate made up, I can figure out where this hole is going to be and probably gonna end up slotting it so I have some room to move it back and forth. On the back of the truck, you can see the cab mount is originally mounted here, and the back of the cab is actually sitting on top of the frame. So what I wanna do with the back is basically the exact same thing. And I'm going to use this hole pattern that is here on the side of the frame, and I'm going to do the same thing and make a little plate that goes up and grabs this rear cab mount. Then I'm going to strengthen it up, and I can either bolt it to the frame to fit it up, and then I can weld it. I'm undecided. It's riveted on, so I figured bolts would probably be very strong to be able to hold this on. But if I really want to, I can go back and weld it in, and I think it should be plenty strong for what we're doing. So regardless, now we have to figure out how we're going to make these little plates up for our cab mounts. So what I did was I went and I figured out what the hole pattern was on those cab mounts on the front. And I translated that to a piece of poster board. Now you want to use poster board when you're making a template rather than cardboard. Cardboard kind of sucks to be able to trace, and it really sucks to bend. Poster board is a lot easier to work with. Just a tip for you guys at home. So I kind of made what I want my cab mount to look like. Basically, I want some holes in here, and I want to grab that top mount on the top of the frame. And to make this out of metal, I kind of cheated a little bit, and two of my friends work in the machine shop, and my buddy ended up cutting this out for me, and my other friend ended up bending it for me. So that saved me a little bit of time. So now that we have two metal cab mounts for the front of the truck, what we can do is we can line these holes up with those rivets. And I'm thinking I'm going to bolt it onto the frame like this, and then bolt the cab in this big slot here, so that way I have enough room to move it back and forth, so I can line it up a little bit better than what I have it right now. So we're gonna go directly to the bottom of the cab with this, and that's gonna hopefully line us up pretty good. Now, instead of just running a thin rubber washer underneath of this, I wanted to try to space the cab up as much as I can for a little bit of room for the turbo clearance. So what I got is these, and I'm gonna stick this underneath the cab and then to the mount, and then bolt directly through there. So that way it acts as a little bit of a cab lift, so we can actually space the cab up some compared to what it is right now. The other thing I had my friends cut out was these little 90-degree gussets, and those are just gonna weld on like this to add some rigidity to this mount. So I think this is gonna be plenty strong enough for what we're trying to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna weld these up real quick, then we can throw them on the cab and see how they look. All right guys, well, I got those parts welded up with the old Yes welder, and I threw some paint on there, and I'm using this satin black paint from Sweet Patina. It actually works really good. It's a spray-on paint, but it dries super fast and it's a nice satin finish. So I went ahead and coated those parts with that. Make sure you check out the link in the description for a discount code for all the Sweet Patina products. So while those are drying, we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start to remove the cab mounts that are originally on the truck. Get those out of the way, so by the time these are dry, we can go ahead and throw them on and see how they fit. All right guys, well it has taken me quite a while to get the cab mounts out, but we finally got them out of the way. So now I'm gonna try to pop those rivets out of the holes, so I have 2 holes at least to line up the new mounts on the cab. So I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna bolt all that stuff together, and then we can finally have our new cab mounts on the frame, and then we can try to figure out how we're gonna lift the cab up to be able to get those rubber spacers under there. So we finally got the cab mounts installed to the frame. Been a lot of work. I had to make some stuff fit. I had to ream some of the holes out to get some bolts through there. So now the next step is to put those rubber bushings and space the cab up a little bit to get it off the frame. So I'm gonna put a floor jack under here. Hopefully it's enough to be able to lift this up, get the cab up enough to slide those bushings in there, and then stick a bolt through it. All right guys, well we got the cab on the chassis and it is actually mounted to the chassis, but of course, like everything, there's some problems. Problems aren't the end of the world. You can see the truck sits pretty good and the wheel is lined up pretty decently in the wheel well. But in my opinion, I just am not a fan of how tall the truck is off the frame. So I have these little rubber bushings in there and I threw some here in the front just to try to lift the front cab up. But you can see how much of a body lift this really is. So I think I might go ahead and pull the top one out and then that'll drop it down probably 1.5 inches. The other problem that I have is, unfortunately, you can see in the wheel well here, the little mount that I made here is actually bending. So the material that I used is just too thin to be able to hold the weight of the cab. Maybe you guys have already commented that whenever I started making them, but it is going to be too thin, and it's just spanning that weight across that big gap to be able to mount to the original cab mount. I'm going to go ahead and remake those out of some thicker material and maybe add some more gussets to be able to support that a little better. The back ones seem to be perfectly fine. It's not as much of a span in the middle of it like the front is. So the back I think is going to be fine, but the front I'm going to remake as a thicker material, but at least you can kind of see what it's going to look like all mounted up to the frame. I think what's really throwing me off is these little wheels and tires. So I'm going to go ahead and yank off the original Sasquatch Detroit steel wheel, big 37-inch tires, and slap them on here. And I think it'll look a lot better with the cab lifted up so high. The one thing that is really good about lifting it up is we have a ton more room on the engine bay. So you can see the turbo is about 3 or 4 inches from the top of the firewall, and before it was actually touching. So I'm really glad that that lifted it up. And I did want to make sure that this has tons of room so we can actually work on it if we have a problem. So I want to make it easy to work on, but I also want it to look not chassis swapped. I want it to look pretty factory. So I don't really like the body lift. Like I said, I can adjust how high I want it with those little mounts. So I might pull off that top one and see how it looks. But first, I think we have to put the wheels and tires on because that might make it look a lot better. Now I am going to get a lift kit for this truck to help level it out. These trucks from the factory actually sit with their nose down, and I really hate the way that they look. So I want to have a kit to be able to level it and make it look a lot better. So we're going to be putting that on there. So keep that in mind whenever we put the wheels and tires on, because the front end is actually going to be higher at the end of the day with that lift kit. So we'll have to see and play with how high up and down we want it, but we can at least see what it's kind of going to look like with the big 37-inch tires. All right, well, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, these things are huge and they're very heavy. It took me a while to get them all switched around, but we got them on there. And this truck is absolutely massive. It can't really do it justice on camera, but in person, it is huge compared to what it was. Inside here especially, it's really hard to describe how big this truck really is. It is massive. The track width is a little bit wider than the original truck, and when you put those big tires on there, this thing looks like an absolute monster truck. It's very tall, but like we were talking about before, it kind of works with the 3.5-inch lift that we did on the body and moving the cab up a little bit. You can see our wheel and tire clearance there. Doesn't look too bad. As it sits right now, I honestly think it's pretty perfect. But like I said, I want to get the frame level so that way the front end is a little bit taller. So we're going to do a 4-inch leveling kit on this truck. So now I'm kind of debating whether or not I should just cut those rubber spacers in half to drop the body down a little bit. So that way, whenever we put the lift kit on there, it'll kind of even itself out and look like this. I really like the way it looks right now. It looks awesome. And if you can tell, the truck is almost as tall as my car lift over there. It is very tall. So I really am not a big lifted truck guy, but it looks really cool. So I want to kind of leave it kind of the way it is right now. For right now, the cab is officially mounted to the chassis. Like I said, I am going to have to remake the the two mounts in there. I can swap them out, no problem. Didn't really take me too long to make the body mounts for this one. But now that we got the cab officially bolted to the chassis and we got the wheels and tires on, I really want to get this thing outside so we can step back and take a look at it. It is insane in person how big this thing is. I'm really excited. I think it looks really cool. I hope you guys dig it. So let's bring it outside and see what it looks like. All right, well, we got the truck outside this morning and this thing is absolutely huge whenever it's outside. You can really see how high up the cab is now on the new chassis. So guys, this is what it looks like. And now that I pushed it outside, it does look a lot better with the big wheels and tires on it. And I really like the way that the stance is currently, but the truck is very high up, and like if I'm going eye level to the door, I'm basically at the door handle. So it's very tall. It's kind of hard to tell on camera, but it's very tall in person. It looks pretty good. If it looked like this at the end of the day, I'd be pretty happy with it. I'm not really a fan of how high up the cab is off the frame. So what I think I'm going to do is, these mounts are designed to be two pieces. So there's two pieces of rubber here, and one is supposed to go on the top and one is supposed to go on the bottom of the cab mount. So what I'm going to do is probably just take out the top piece and leave the bottom piece, and hopefully that will drop it down about 2 inches. And then, like I said, we're getting that leveling kit, so then hopefully that'll kind of even itself out by lifting the front up and then dropping the body down. I think it'll look a lot better, but it'll probably be about this ride height in the end. So with everything together, this is probably about what it's going to look like. Now, one thing I did really like about lifting the body up this high is you can see I have a ton of room up there on top of the turbo. So I really did like that a lot. So that way it gives me some room. But if I drop the body down a little bit, I think I'll still have plenty of room on top of that turbo. So I think it looks really cool. I definitely am not really a giant lifted truck guy, so I kind of want to lower it down a little bit. But this thing definitely has a big presence to it. It is crazy how big this truck is, and these are 37-inch tires, and it kind of makes it look like 33s. I mean, this truck is absolutely huge when you see it in person. So comment down below what you guys think the ride height should be. Should we lower the cab down a little bit, or should we just leave it the way it is and then add that 4-inch lift? Comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe so you can stay up to date with the Sasquatch project and all the rest of the builds we have here on Rustomod. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.